So, as noted earlier, De Quincey was able to insinuate himself pretty deeply into the Wordsworth circle, becoming very close with Wordsworth's children, becoming very close with Dorothy. In fact, some believe that he and Dorothy had a bit of a romance, not a romance that was really expressed or certainly not consummated, but De Quincey was often teased as if Mary were his sweetheart, and Mary often teased as if De Quincey might one day propose to her. This never came off, and eventually De Quincey ended up impregnating the daughter of a Lake District farmer, Margaret, and he did end up marrying her and having many children with her. This was part of the reason that he and Wordsworth and the Wordsworth family broke. Here I want to talk a little bit about De Quincey's relationship to females and to death. I talked about this a little bit earlier in describing De Quincey's reaction to the death of his sister Elizabeth when she was 9 and he was 6, and comparing his reaction to her loss to his reaction to losing Anne the prostitute in Confessions of an English Opium Eater. Well, here I'm going to begin by talking about De Quincey's relationship with Catherine Wordsworth. She was the daughter of Mary and William, and De Quincey sort of took to her and took her under his wing, agreeing to educate her, but basically becoming her almost constant companion, playmate. And when she died at the age of 3, De Quincey fell into throes of grief, much more flagrant than those of the father himself, Wordsworth, who, by comparison to De Quincey, handled the tragedy with rather admirable stoicism. So here's De Quincey describing his reaction to the death of young Catherine Wordsworth. This is in a letter to Dorothy. Dorothy and William were in fact very concerned about De Quincey after the death, and rather unselfishly reached out to him saying, "Hey, are you okay?" And here's how De Quincey responds to Dorothy. Nobody can judge from Catherine's manner to me before others what love she showed to me when we were playing or talking together alone. On the night when she slept with me in the winter, we lay awake all the middle of the night and talked, oh, how tenderly together. When we fell asleep, she was lying in my arms. Once or twice I awoke from the pressure of her dear body, but I could not find it in my heart to disturb her. Many times on that night, when she was murmuring out tender sounds of endearment, she would lock her little arms with such passionateness round my neck, as if she had known that it was to be the last night we were ever to pass together. Ah, pretty, pretty love, would God I might have seen thy face and kissed thy dear lips again. One could easily say that in the death of Catherine, De Quincey was re-experiencing the loss of his sister Elizabeth. He actually lost another sister as well, and also the loss of Anne, though much older. Frances Wilson, I've mentioned her a couple of times already. She's really a fantastic biographer of De Quincey. She calls De Quincey's fixation on young dead girls nympholepsy. The word referred in De Quincey's time to the phenomenon of actually seeing a nymph from Greek or Roman mythology, actually seeing a nymph in the forest, and of course being utterly enamored of the nymph, but because the nymph is supernatural, one must die. One thinks of Actaeon, in this case, seeing Diana and her sicking her hounds upon him, and they eventually killed him. So in De Quincey, there's this fascination with innocence, the youth, but there's also this erotic quality, even though certainly these young women, not Anne, but his sisters and Catherine are not women who would be sexualized in any way. But there's a kind of eroticism to the longing as well. But also there's this sense that once dead, these women become unobtainable. So you have this involute, to use De Quincey's word, in the dead young woman, one that Poe himself would note some years later. Poe, a deep student of De Quincey, was in the dying young woman, the dead young woman, was an involute of this sense of, okay, innocence lost, an erotic object that is now unattainable, but also an erotic object that, though unattainable, is perhaps now a part of eternity. So the nympholep, in De Quincey's sense, would be someone who sees in the dead young girl a symbol of constant longing, this eternal desire for a sort of unobtainable beauty. This is exactly an early version of Poe's idea, disturbing, that the most poetic subject is the death of a beautiful woman, because that death opens the mourner up to a vision of eternity, beauty, eternal beauty, even though unobtainable, is nonetheless stimulating because it constantly incites desire and constantly incites a vision that approximates that object, which is ultimately beyond vision. You can see this certainly in Poe's poem The Raven, as well as Ulalume and Annabel Lee. So it's important in looking at De Quincey's Confessions of an English Opium Eater to think about him as this kind of nympholept, because certainly we can see the whole second part of Confessions of an English Opium Eater as De Quincey using opium as a way of sort of escaping the pain of time, the limitations of time, and opening up to some sort of eternal vision, even though, of course, it's a drug-induced hallucination. But the yearning for contact with a young woman is in some ways the same as the yearning to transcend pain through the taking of opium.